Hello and welcome to another episode of the RevOps Lab. I am here with Kristina Kardell. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Wish we had a bit of a better summer in Berlin, but otherwise I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, it sucks. It's a really, really bad summer. I think I've never been had so much rain. We had a very good chat about, revenue cadences at RevOps AF Berlin. And today we wanted to dive deeply into this topic. But before we dive in, I'd love to, learn more about who you are and what you currently do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do revenue operations and go-to-market strategy currently at Combo, which is unified API for HR tech, a startup here in Berlin. Also have an office in New York. Previously, I was at Leapsome, also doing revenue operations and go-to-market strategy. And then my background is in management consulting.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think today we wanted to dissect revenue cadences. Maybe for context, right? Like, I think if you want it or not, you do run a revenue cadences, a set of different check-ins, touch points, and deliverables that need to happen at between different members. And so, I mean, in your mind, like, what is a revenue cadence, and why do they actually matter?
I mean, I think it's in a nutshell, is kind of what you already alluded to, I think. But for me, it's a kind of structured rhythm of meetings and reporting cycles that kind of makes sure that your go-to-market engine or revenue engine is, marching to the same beat and in the same direction, or what type of like analogy you want to use. But what it also is to me, and ensuring that we have those cadences is actually the glue between kind of plan and execution. Mm-hmm. So, you know where to go, but also then making sure that you actually kind of walk in the right direction, so to speak. And I think, it's one of those like really important things to get right and actually think through, because otherwise plans tend to be just that, like just a plan, and then you just get stuck in kind of execution. So yeah, I mean, happy to also elaborate even more on why I think it's important and like what the consequences can be if you don't do this right. But yeah, so that's.
Yeah, I think obviously getting, marketing and sales and CS, the go-to-market function and product aligned, and also, ensure that RevOps has all the information needed to help orchestrate different workflows is obviously super crucial. And in my experience, revenue cadence can be a great help of that. Maybe let's start high level, right? Like, you set this up at Leapsome, right? So today we want to dive deep into your experience, kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Like, of like your lessons learned. Typically there's an annual cadence. Maybe let's start there, right? And then let's go into focus in on the in-quarter cadence. But yeah, what was your annual cadence? And then how did you go into the in-quarter cadence? Yeah.
And so annually, if I just summarize quickly, we would do both obviously like a financial plan, and then next to that, like a strategy or whatever you want to call it, like overarching kind of goals and bets that we want to achieve, and that we think will then move us along and actually achieving those goals. So typically that would start in early Q3, talking more about these high level kind of bets. If we think that we need to, look into specific like product areas, when, more kind of strategizing around what do we think we need to do. And then next to that, later on, starting to actually finalize, okay, what does that mean in terms of, numbers for growth, and what does that mean for the different functions, et cetera. So I think just having that clarity, and we don't need to maybe deep dive into the annual planning process, because I think that in itself is an entire topic. But having this joint understanding both on what are the numbers that we expect to hit or that we want to hit, and next to that, kind of verbalizing it in the strategy. So like, okay, what does that actually mean? Like, what are we doing to actually move towards those goals? And I think having that joint understanding is definitely the foundation for then trickling that down into an kind of in-quarter cadence and like a quarterly planning. So you have kind of that North Star to kind of anchor it all to.
And if you think about the in-quarter cadence, what was, how was it set up at Leapsome? What exactly were the touch points? Yeah, if you maybe summarize first, and then we'll dive into the different, areas.
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I would split it into two buckets. So we have cross-functional cadences, and then we have intra-functional cadences, so to speak. Like, for example, within the sales function or within the RevOps team. So that's at least how I usually look at it. And then, of course, the other kind of dimension there is kind of the level of the topics that you're discussing. So splitting then into when are we talking about more like long-term strategic topics? When are we, tactically maybe aligning on things? And when are we operational and like executing? So that's kind of two dimensions that I would just like frame this by. And then if we start looking at like a cross-functional, now focusing, of course, on go-to-market. So the go-to-market leadership team, as an example, we would do on the more like strategic level, we would do quarterly kind of retros tied to QBRs. And then we would also do then a quarterly kind of planning session where we would go back to the annual goals or the annual cycle that we set. So, okay, what did we say for, the upcoming quarter that we want to achieve? Did we have already ideas on, bigger projects or initiatives? Can we use learnings from the past quarter to kind of adjust, etc.? So we have a quarterly, more strategic session. Then we have a bi-weekly go-to-market leadership meeting that is more on a tactical level that we also can, of course, deep dive into what that means. So that's a bi-weekly. And then we actually chose to monthly do a forecast call also in the go-to-market leadership. So that we have like a cadence of understanding how are we pacing throughout the quarter, where will we end, already maybe looking at an outlook for the subsequent quarter. And we actually tied that to these bi-weekly leadership meetings. So every other one would just be prolonged, basically. So if you imagine kind of a flow from this like longer quarterly sessions going into this like bi-weekly sync and then back up to the kind of quarterly session. So that's on the cross-functional go-to-market side. And then if we take just sales as an example, it can obviously also be customer success or marketing. We'll obviously have the intra-functional setups to ensure that we're then also structuring information flows to the team and focusing also their time. And there we did a weekly team meeting in the sales team, so the frontline manager together with their reps, where they would both, of course, discuss general kind of topics if there were updates or information. They would also review weekly the forecast submissions of the team, strategize maybe around key deals if anyone had, issues or maybe learnings. They would bring that into the team setting to have them collaborate, and then kind of just general team topics. We had weekly one-on-ones between the frontline manager and the rep that included a deep like pipeline focus, so more actually going really, really deep on like a pipeline review individually. And then we also ensured that within each go-to-market function, we had a leadership meeting. So the frontline managers together with the VP, enablement, and RevOps would meet bi-weekly on the more like tactical level to see like what's going on in the function. Is there any, fires that needs to be put out, etc. And the benefit of having that also bi-weekly is that it can kind of overlap with this bi-weekly go-to-market leadership meeting that I was talking about earlier, so that, we can have information coming from the front line into the go-to-market leadership, from the go-to-market leadership back into the front line. So you have this kind of natural kind of flow of information. And now I feel like I've been talking for a very long time. Just the last puzzle piece, I think, just to mention, is that we also did in the RevOps team a bi-weekly planning cycle, so that we had the same kind of cycle going there as well, of like these are longer projects that are running, but then we also bi-weekly say, okay, this is now my, upcoming sprint or whatever you want to label it. So I think that gives a sense, hopefully.
Okay. So I'll repeat from the end. So obviously the RevOps you just mentioned, but then weekly one-on-ones between the managers and the reps, going deep on the pipeline review. Then a weekly team meeting, frontline managers with their team. You have X managers, right? So everybody does that to share learnings, discuss key deals, discuss strategy, also review the forecast submissions.
Yep.
For the managers to then probably adjust, so that flows into the team leadership meeting that is bi-weekly. And then alternates like bi-weekly, like every 2 weeks there's basically this meeting, but then once a month it's kind of prolonged into a forecast meeting. And then you have a quarterly QBR, which is more like a retro to look at the previous quarter, and then you have a quarterly planning session. And then this is all orchestrated in times of a flow, so that like one meeting basically prepares the other. So I assume the one-on-ones happen before the maybe team frontline manager meeting, that happens before the bi-weekly team leadership meeting, and then okay. So let's maybe dive into a few of those meetings. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's super helpful, and this is something we see at many companies, right? Like I think you want to strike the balance between too few meetings and too many meetings. So it's very important, because there's a lot of time spent, right? Like if you think about how much money these meetings spend in terms of comp, it's a lot, right? So if you do them too often, it's very expensive, and you might actually make the meeting even worse, right? Because you're actually discussing the same things, versus you have too few of those, alignment starts to trickle, and you have other ripple effects that might be challenging because the information is not flowing across the different areas. So very specifically, right? Like, let's maybe start with, and we can touch on this like fast, right? So what I would love to know is like, who's in the meeting? How do you prepare it? And what is kind of the three main outcomes, right? Like, let's maybe start with the team meeting for the like frontline managers. Like, I mean, I assume who's in the meeting is clear, but like, kind of what's the top three items, and then, what's the outcome? And then maybe we go through these different meetings. So.
I would say that they have three main topics, which I think you summarized also fairly well just now in your little aggregation of what I just said. But updates and information. So if there have been RevOps launched a new process or something is going on in the company, like the frontline manager would bring this back to the reps. So that's one agenda item.
Would you join these meetings as well as RevOps? I mean, would you sometimes say, hey, look, there's this meeting anyways, like, let me just join it?
Yes, on like a need basis. So for example, if we launched a new process, or there's something going on that we thought was best to actually discuss with the reps, or we needed input, we would join the meetings just to like explain or like talk it through with the team instead of doing it async. So it would depend, but yes. So on a need basis, but not all the time. Yes, and then the second item would be the forecast submissions. So what changed from last week? Where are we? What does that mean? How can we, maybe look at key deals together and strategize? And then the last part would be that we encourage the reps to actually bring in, this is where I would need help or input, or can anyone, help me? So I would say those are like the three things that would happen in that meeting.
Awesome. And then you have the team meeting. Maybe let's start with the non-forecasting edition. Who's in there? What do you typically discuss there? How does it work?
You mean with the sales team?
Yeah, I mean, so more. I think you had this like bi-weekly team leadership cross-functional. I think was the intra, but
yeah. So. Bi-weekly, exactly. We had a sales leadership meeting. That's what we call it. So that would be the frontline managers, the VP, enablement, and RevOps. And that would be both in kind of aggregating any learnings or issues or questions that are coming from the team, or RevOps giving updates on, hey, this is what's upcoming, so that the managers can already be bought in on maybe things that are going to be launched. Same thing for enablement. If there are trainings coming up, they could kind of warm up the FLMs or discuss. And obviously then also for the VP to then review forecast submissions to then bring that back into the go-to-market leadership, or if there are things coming from the go-to-market leadership, you can kind of bring that back in. So you have this kind of, back and forth kind of motion also. Yeah.
And how long is that meeting? Like
45 minutes.
Okay. Team meeting for the managers is also 45 minutes? Or?
Yeah.
Okay. And I assume you tried 60 and you tried 30, and why not 30 or 60?
So I think 30 for a bi-weekly, we just thought it was too short typically because there are like a lot of topics to cover. 45 for us was this kind of golden kind of middle ground, because then you have usually that spare 15 where you don't really book anything. So if something comes up within the meeting where you feel like, oh, I really want to just like deep dive on this already now, we could say we kind of park it and we take it in that little 15-minute break, because otherwise you risk already trying to go into solution mode on the call, which is really isn't helpful. But then you naturally provide that space to have like a quick debrief.
Yeah. Okay. And who owns the meeting? Is there an agenda? What makes it to the agenda? Like, who is the agenda owner, and how do you do like to-dos after the meeting? Yeah.
So for the sales leadership or the intra-functional ones, it's the VP of the function that owns the meeting. And typically the outcomes would be owned by, or notes would be taken by RevOps typically to ensure follow-up. And then, depending on who is the owner of the follow-up, obviously then carries out.
Why are you smiling? So
I'm smiling.
A little anecdote. When I was studying, I worked with a consultant, and we consulted Deutsche Telekom. And one of our jobs was to basically orchestrate meetings. So we were in these meetings with around 20 people. Pretty much like, executives and then further down. So I think the meeting overall, like 2 hours, costs $50,000 if you just look at the comp. And if we were not there were basically no agenda, no structured discussion, and also no outcomes. I think that's actually reality that is very true in many companies. And so what you just said, right? Like it's extremely important that, it's not just, it's clear what the agenda is, it's clear what kind of the meeting hygiene factors are, and then also what the outcomes is. Let's maybe go into this like cross-functional meeting. Now I forgot, is that also once a month or bi-weekly, or like, and what was the purpose of that again? Yeah, bi-weekly. Yeah.
Yes. So there we would have, of course, then the respective VPs of marketing, sales, CS. We had and RevOps, and then we had 2 co-CEOs. So actually, then also the founders in the session. So that was the kind of base setup of members. And this really is very based upon this like quarterly planning. So it's really important that you already have kind of an alignment on, these are the strategic initiatives or areas that we're focusing on for this quarter. Because when you have that many, and especially senior people in the room, you want to make sure that the discussion is productive and focused. So what we would do is check in on progress. So you would typically have, say you have a focus area for the quarter where maybe marketing and sales are both contributing. They would give like a red, green, yellow, just status update. To not go too deep in just information sharing either, but just say, it's on track, off track. And if they would need input from someone else, or they're blocked, or they need maybe a decision to be made, then they would prepare that and actually have that discussion happen in the meeting.
And is that also with regards to KPIs, or is that more strategic initiatives, or both?
It could be both. So we typically try to start with the initiatives to make sure that we had time for that. And then you should typically have KPIs also tied to the initiatives to actually be able to track progress. But that's usually how we did it, so that we have already also this forum for discussions. And then we were at least tried to, reality sometimes happens, but also tried to be strict with actually preparing that. So say, we have this ongoing initiative. I am now the VP of sales and I'm realizing I need a decision on something from our VP marketing, to actually then prepare that and post it on the agenda at least 48 hours beforehand, so that people can also, read through, prepare, so that we in the meeting can go straight to actually the discussion and the decision.
How many people were in the meeting and who owned the meeting?
So RevOps was the moderator of the meeting, and we would then be 6 or 7 people, if I'm not counting correctly.
Yeah. Companies around 200 people, just for context, right? Like at that point, I think so.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then, I mean, how do you tie your annual goals and then quarterly goals also in that meeting, so that you always look at it every 2 weeks with the entire kind of go-to-market executive team, I would call it? Yeah.
Yes, we do, and then we also did a monthly business review that was more brief, just like KPI kind of snapshots. And then if something was like very off, we would bring that into the meeting and discuss. Then also looking at the forecast numbers that we already mentioned, like coming in from the VP, from the front line. And then quarterly, obviously doing a bigger QBR session. Because when you have that also, like that pulse of checking the KPIs and the progress, then everyone is kind of already aligned and aware of what's going on, what maybe needs to be done. And so it makes also the discussions, a lot more smooth. It also makes, investor reporting easier, because you don't need to chase down context. You can already proactively communicate. It's also easier when we were preparing for board decks and things like that, because you already have this kind of alignment and everyone is already aware of how we're doing.
So it sounds like you have basically a reporting package for this specific meeting that hardly ever changes, minus the strategic initiatives. But the strategic initiatives also like longer term strategic initiatives. So I would assume that they also are like standing items to look at.
Yeah.
And then the KPIs obviously standing items, and you're aligned on what you want to look at and how you report on it, which then can obviously flow into the board deck, which is also really good, I think.
Yeah.
Really good practice.
Yeah. And then when you have that agreement and understanding also on the KPIs, we obviously set up the dashboards in our BI tool, so you also don't have to do it's already there and kind of done. So it also minimizes the time for RevOps to actually prepare the numbers. You can more focus on actually looking at the results, which is obviously the important part.
Yeah. Did you have a section in that where RevOps basically presents like their view, like, hey, look, I mean, this we analyzed, with the status quo, and we saw this is something where we think there's an opportunity to, I don't know, reduce leakage or grow faster or improve the initiatives? Like, was that also a standing item?
Yeah, so we typically tied that to the MBRs and QBRs, because RevOps would, prepare the numbers and go deep on the results. So part of that would be me writing a little commentary, asking maybe the specific functions to comment if there was results where I didn't feel like I already had context, or maybe wanted them to provide even more context. And then when we also did the QBR quarterly planning, like around this time, we would both flag like, hey, we see opportunities here or risks here, bring that into this session. Or, if it's more RevOps topics, we would obviously just put it more on our own roadmap. But that way we can kind of pre-feed. Also, the benefit of being the moderator of these cross-functional sessions is, hey, in this, strategic planning session, we should be looking at these results. These were the furthest off, or things like that. This is what we aggregated already from running these meetings. And here is also things that we found that we think that we should have a closer look at.
Yeah. Got it. So basically the intra-functional meeting every 2 weeks, VPs plus frontline managers. Here, this basically cross-functional is really the VPs, C-level plus RevOps enablement, owned by RevOps, and then kind of prepared always in the same rhythm reducing of like kind of the overhaul. You mentioned initially that you had this like, you know, alternation of like, or you extended the bi-weekly meeting to like a monthly business review. I assume that's also the forecast meeting. Is that the same like kind of thing?
Yeah, exactly. So we would look at obviously then right in the beginning of each month the results from the past month, and then actually check the forecast numbers for the upcoming month, but primarily do we think the quarter will end, and then a first glance at the subsequent quarter.
Yeah.
So having that monthly cadence. Exactly.
Yeah. So I assume that, you know, beginning of the quarter, you only focus on the quarter, then probably mid-quarter, like the second, right? Like you probably focus on the quarter. And then in the third one, you also focus on the quarter plus one, or like, I mean, basically, is that something you look at or?
Yeah, exactly. And I would say also it differs a little bit per KPI you're looking at. So I would say mid-quarter, we would already have a pretty good eye on pipeline coverage for the upcoming quarter, which obviously depends a little bit on how long your sales cycle is. And then the further we get to the end of the quarter, you know, that's when we also would look at the actual forecast in terms of bookings for the upcoming quarter, because sales cycles are too short. So there's really no point in doing that earlier in the quarter.
What were your top 3 like KPIs you looked at in this meeting? Like
in the forecast call?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, or in the like kind of executive team call bi-weekly can be a forecast call, but like in general, like I mean, you're pretty. I mean, outside of the, let's say, the go-to-market metrics, I assume you look at kind of ARR, MRR, right? Like net new ARR, you know, or ARR net new from, you know, new logo, expansion, renewal, right? Like, so all this like fun stuff on the financial side more, but like when you think of the go-to-market metrics like pipeline coverage, sounds like that was one. Any other metrics you looked at?
Yeah, and I mean, it really goes back to what type of motion you're running, of course. We were very inbound driven. So something we obviously looked at is top of funnel conversion rates, because that was a very good indicator of kind of the downstream effect on bookings. So that would be both, you know, volume in terms of number of bookings, but also then conversion into first meeting and accepted opportunities. So that was typically also one of those focus areas, which just because it was really important to our go-to-market motion.
So how many meetings are actually happening, and then how do they convert into a qualified opportunity?
Yeah.
And then obviously, right, like you look at the kind of close one, you look at pipeline coverage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because that's, I mean, also depending on how frequently you look at certain KPIs, that obviously then becomes kind of the leading indicator for what does the pipeline coverage look like, and what kind of opportunities do we have to actually close. So that's kind of the how we were thinking about it.
Okay, awesome. And then let's lead into this, you know, wonderful, easy meeting QBR. I mean, I assume if you are like so aligned and you have all these different things well set up, then the QBR should be a lot easier than if you meet once a quarter and then, you know, nobody knows each other and it's like the first time and you're sitting there. How long is a QBR? How do you prepare it? Like, let's go through it.
Yeah. And I mean, I will be very honest also saying that it's a format that we continuously tweaked. Because I think it's also one of those things that, you know, you also have very good intentions, things come up, as with any meeting. So I think it's also something that, you know, you continuously kind of, you know, reflect, tweak, adjust. So I think that's just want to preface that. But we usually did these sessions around 90 minutes to like sometimes 2 hours if we felt like there was really something like big topics we needed to discuss for the upcoming quarter. So it was a bit fluid. We as in RevOps always prepared, you know, the written actual QBR with the metrics, a summary of, you know, the initiatives, what have been going on in the quarter. We asked the respective functions to summarize their, you know, learnings, results, etc. that format, I would say we also played around with a little bit how extensive we wanted that to be. But we also thought it was really important to bring in, actually bring in also the reflections from the team. So it's not just the go-to-market leadership reflecting in the QBR. And then we as in RevOps, try to summarize, hey, this is actually where we should be focusing, results that were off, initiatives that didn't go as planned, that were maybe pushed, we would bring into the session so that we could have a productive discussion. And then we would review what are the goals for the upcoming quarter and the initiatives that we had already set out. Does this hold true given what we just looked at in terms of learnings and results? Do we need to adjust anything? Do we need to add anything? Or can we continue on with these priorities?
Yeah, awesome. And who attended those? I mean, yeah.
It was the go-to-market leadership and also finance.
Okay. But frontline managers typically not there, or?
Typically not. We tried a little bit different versions. I think that there's benefits in both. I mean, the bigger the group, the more difficult it can be to have productive discussions. But on the other hand, you also have, tighter conversations. So we tried both having them join the session, but then also having the prep rather being the VP with the managers, and then kind of the VP being the voice into the go-to-market leadership. So I think it also depends a lot on the size of your organization, if that's actually feasible. But obviously, it's super important to make sure that then this pre-alignment happens between the VP and the frontline managers, so that you keep your ear close to the frontline.
Yeah, I have a few random questions, maybe just going through this. But did you then share the QBR deck with everybody in the company, or with a specific group that didn't attend the QBRs, or was that not done?
Yeah, so the numbers we typically shared. The strategic initiatives, we would share a condensed version to say this is the focus for the upcoming quarter. So that people were kind of aware of, which are kind of big initiatives that are running. And we would just do it condensed just to reduce noise, basically. Yeah.
And what did you learn about kind of how to run a good meeting? Right? You've been then in various different meetings with different stakeholders, right? And I think we've all been in these meetings where it can be challenging, right? And emotions might overtake. And so I'm curious. And I think that's obviously it's a cultural topic, right? But how do you run a good meeting? What do you think is important now?
I mean, I think for me, and it might be also just me personally, a lot of it comes back to having a strong pre-alignment of what is the purpose of this meeting, what's the agenda, what is the maybe preparation in terms of information, numbers, etc. Because if you have that spelled out explicitly, I at least find it a lot easier to, if the conversation derails and discussion derails, to kind of wheel people back in and say, hey, no, this is actually not what we're supposed to be talking about right now. So you're kind of doing yourself a favor by being as clear as possible already going in, setting those parameters. Then obviously reality happens, and it is very tricky, especially, end of the quarter, you have deals, or maybe your, VP wants to talk to your CEO about being an exec sponsor, there's things happen. Sometimes you just have to take a breath and let them talk and then kind of come back. But a little trick that I also found very helpful was actually this 45-minute duration that we talked about earlier. Because then you can also say, hey, no, we actually, we don't have time for this right now. But you have this, little 15-minute break after you can just stay on the call. So that's a pretty good trick, because almost no one will schedule an actual meeting in those 15 minutes. So it's a simple way to buy yourself.
I think that's great. And especially if someone, you realize there's 6, 7 people in the room, and this is a 101 discussion. Right, and everybody else is getting anxious about this because they're all busy.
Yeah.
They don't want to sit there and listen to something that's very irrelevant to them.
Yeah.
Any other tricks or tips you want to share? I mean, I think this has been awesome, but yeah.
I think those are the most important ones. And I think for yourself, really continuously through the meeting, also summarize, okay, we started this discussion because of we wanted to make a decision on X. And it sounds now like we're all agreeing on ABC. Is that like correct? So that you're really like explicitly making sure that you're actually accomplishing what you set out to do. Which is also kind of ties back to this, like preempting the discussion with, okay, we're not talking about this because of why, because we need input, because we want to make a decision, because it's information. Like, why do we bring this up today? What's kind of the intention? And then let people discuss and then say, okay, hey, are we actually now close to a decision? Is this a decision? Are we in agreement? Who owns this? When do we follow up? So like,
yeah. I mean, a decision that is not documented and explicitly shared afterwards is actually not a decision, right? Like, because like people then wiggle and say, well, we didn't talk about it or we didn't decide on it, right?
Yeah.
So making that very explicit, I think, is super crucial.
Yeah.
And sometimes really hard. I think there's forums where, I mean, I learned that at Fiverr, where we had kind of the executive meeting, obviously meeting weekly, right? Like 4 or 5 people. We made a lot of decisions all the time, right? We had an extended leadership as a company, right? With like 35 people. That were basically team leads, and this was purely information sharing. We tried to make decisions, it just didn't work, and it's not the right the right forum, right? And so I think what you just alluded to is like there are different forums across the hierarchy, across the teams, functionally or cross-functionally, where you basically create different rooms where you can still make decisions because it's small enough and it's efficient and it's trusted, right? I think that's also very important. Like people, right? I think we've all been in this situation where, 5 people have worked together for, 2 years, and then there's a new person joining and it changes the culture of the meeting and it changes the culture of the discussion. And you need that trust, right? To be able to like be explicit and, maybe like kind of true to your thoughts and agree to disagree, but at the same time, understand that it's from the best interest of the company. And I think we've all been in that meeting where it didn't feel like that. It felt more like in the best interest of the person. And obviously that is something that, always plays a role in these meetings and is sometimes really hard to orchestrate, especially given the pressure and, time constraints everybody in go-to-market is working on that, right? Which I think is a reality for everyone.
For sure. And I think something also that supports what you just mentioned is that clarity of why are we meeting? Like, what's the intention? What's the mandate that we have also in this group? Because I think that also makes it easier to know, okay, should we be talking about this? Can I make this decision? And do I need to talk to someone else? Like trying to be as clear as possible, because I think clarity brings that kind of confidence and trust.
Yeah. Awesome. Look, I mean, I think this was super nice. Really enjoyed it. Very clear. I think very applicable also. Very structured. Obviously like that very much. Given what we're talking about here. Before you go, I mean, is there any book you would recommend or research report or, like anything? Doesn't need to be RevOps related, but can be. Yeah.
I mean, RevOps related, I do think the revenue architecture book, I think it's a good one to fall back on and reflect on. I like podcasts also personally. Of course, this podcast, whoever you might want to listen to, because I like, maybe when you're running or going to the job, I think it's a good like bite size to be inspired. But the other type of resource I would encourage people to tap into is actually networks, RevOps networks. I think RevOps is a wonderful community, and people are usually very willing to share experiences, learnings, support, or just moral support when it's needed. So I think that's actually really cool and really, really nice to be part of that community. So whether it's online or if you can go to a meetup, I encourage everyone to do that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for joining. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me.